Well, it's one of the poorest counties in the country. It's a very complex, interesting, stimulating sort of culture. It's a beautiful landscape, and it's a good place to think and act and to do it without the usual pressures that we find on campus. The students get away from the sort of routines that they normally get lost in, and they can immerse themselves much more in the work.
So I'm Pam Dorr, and I'm the Executive Director of the Hale Empowerment and Revitalization Organization. We call it HERO because no one can say the whole name. And I've been the Executive Director since we started the organization. And I had come here with Auburn's Rural Studio program as part of their outreach fellowship. And I stayed for a year and then opened this nonprofit, thinking that the work I had started just needed more. We've also opened a small habitat chapter, a really small rural habitat chapter, and we build houses that way too. So most of the people that work here also volunteer for Habitat. And primarily our business is housing counseling. So we work as Auburn's community partner, and we get families ready for homeownership. It's pretty clear early on, people had incomes, they had their credit in a place where they might become homeowners. But the rural development felt, when I first moved here, that you couldn't build a house under $80,000 in our county that could be built to their standard. But families could afford to pay $20,000. I broached the subject of the $20,000 house, but it wasn't until Rural Studio said they'd take it on as a challenge that somebody realistically made an attempt to do that.
The 20K house project has its own inherent challenges. But then there are additional challenges in that not everybody in the community is necessarily thrilled with the idea of our building what to them are strange-looking houses. And I think there's a little bit of a fear of some of the social implications of our building in the community as well. Well, Greensboro, where we're building this year, is a community that physically and probably culturally hasn't changed much for a very long time, and what change there is happens sort of slowly and deliberately. We come in as part of a larger effort to build new housing in the community, and it's a kind of shock to the system in some ways. And we work closely with Pam Dorr of HERO, and much of the housing that she is building right now is pretty conventional, a little bit less so. But all of it, in its own way, is sort of troubling because it does represent change, and it's not a place that accepts change, so easily.
The opinion would be the houses are funky and don't fit in with the antebellum houses of Greensboro. And I don't think trailers do either.
I couldn't afford it to have lived in the house that I lived in for about 45 years. And it was, the house was over 100 years old. It didn't have no insulation in it. My dad and my mom done the best they could. They raised 7 kids, and we grew up the hard way. We didn't have a silver spoon in our hand.
The 502 program, it's a loan grant program that you can get a loan from the government to go towards housing construction or towards a house. Except the only problem with the housing industry the way it is now, $20,000 won't get you very far. Typically, so the best option for a lot of people, if they could get this loan, would be a used trailer. It's probably the only thing that they could afford, and so that's kind of why we wanted to try to find a prototype that could be replicable for the $20,000.
Yeah, I mean, what we are trying to develop is an alternative to the trailer. I'm sure there are many people who would much prefer to have the trailers built. Or moved in, because in their own way they're familiar and they represent a certain convention. And what we're doing represents a kind of unconventional alternative.